On October 7th, we released a podcast titled Military Action in Venezuela, A Legal Analysis. Jim Newman and I interviewed retired Rear Admiral Jamie Barnett and retired Major General Andy Turley. Since that episode aired, there have been a couple of new developments that we want to share with you. Number one, there now have been 6 boat strikes resulting in the loss of 29 lives and 2 survivors. And all of these strikes have been in international waters. Also, 4-star Navy Admiral Alvin Halsey, who served as commander of the United States Southern Command since November the 7th of 2024, has submitted his resignation from the military and will be leaving his post at the end of the year. On October the 18th, Scott Simon with NPR reported this title. The head of U.S. Southern Command, who oversees all military action in the Caribbean and South America, is stepping down after just 1 year in his post. His retirement was announced by Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth this week on social media. I reached out to Rear Admiral Burnett, but he was unable for comment. Also reached out to Major General Turley, and this was his response, and I quote, Admiral Halsey, as can be expected, has given no reason for his resignation. I would not expect a senior officer to air any disagreements with the administration as a matter of honor and integrity. We can only surmise it might be related to the Venezuela operation, but that would be pure speculation. We simply have no facts, and it would not be wise to speculate. He may be resigning for other reasons unrelated to this current operation. Thanks, Andy. In today's world of miscommunication, lies, and falsehoods, Jim and I also share a passion for facts and not speculation. We invite you to do additional research and draw your own conclusions. The link to the NPR article will be posted in this video. Jim and I also invite you to view the podcast, to subscribe to MS Happenings, Mississippi Happenings, the podcast, and to donate to our desire and our commitment to give you news and information that affects all of us. Thanks.
The head of U.S. Southern Command, who oversees all military activity in the Caribbean and South America, is stepping down after just a year in the post. His retirement was announced by Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth this week on social media, NPR's Quill Lawrence reports.
Secretary Hegseth announced that Admiral Alvin Halsey would retire after 37 years in the military and praised what he called the Admiral's unwavering commitment to mission, people, and nation. U.S. Southern Command later posted a message from Admiral Halsey thanking his troops. It's highly unusual for an officer not to finish the full 3 years of a command like this, and even stranger in the middle of a military buildup which has seen thousands of U.S. troops move into position off the Venezuelan coast. Admiral Halsey is black. The Trump administration has let go several senior military leaders who are non-white or female, implying that they'd been promoted for that reason. But there's another theory this time, says retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery.
I'd probably lean more towards we're conducting extremely unusual operations in Southern Command right now that a reasonable person could disagree with the legality of.
At least 6 times recently, the U.S. military has made lethal strikes on small civilian vessels. The White House says they carried drugs. Critics say the strikes are illegal under both U.S. and international law and that they amount to execution without trial. Montgomery says the military is ill-suited to that job.
As much as I absolutely want to prevent all drugs coming into the country, this kind of law enforcement action against narcotic deliveries is best handled by law enforcement that does appropriate due process.
A U.S. official not authorized to speak publicly has confirmed with NPR that Admiral Halsey recently met with Hegseth at the Pentagon to express his concerns and then stepped down. After that news broke, President Trump confirmed the most recent strike on what he described as a drug-carrying submarine. Trump said without evidence that this was, quote, not a group of innocent people. A second U.S. official who was not permitted to speak publicly said U.S. troops seized 2 survivors after that strike, and they're being brought elsewhere for possible legal proceedings. Quill Lawrence, NPR News.
Hello, my name is David Oles, and I'm your co-host for Mississippi Happenings podcast. Joining me each week is my friend and co-host, Jim Newman. Jim, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
Man, I'm good.
I'm excited about today's show.
Yes, we are very fortunate to have 2 very distinguished guests with us, and very happy with that.
Why don't you tell us about them?
Each week, we talk about the kitchen table issues facing Mississippians, but we cannot ignore the fact that what happens around the world affects us in Mississippi. Since September the 2nd, the U.S. military has struck at least 3 boats off the coast of Venezuela, killing at least 17 people. President Donald Trump said that the boats were carrying drugs en route to the United States. 7 warships, a nuclear-powered submarine, and F-35 stealth fighters have been deployed to international waters off Venezuela's coast. This is the biggest U.S. naval deployment in the Caribbean. Today, we have 2 very distinguished individuals with firsthand experience and knowledge of military affairs and international laws and diplomacy. I want to first welcome retired Rear Navy Admiral Jamie Barnett. Jamie is a professor at the Ole Miss Center for Intelligence and Security Studies, teaching national security and cyber security policy courses. He served 32 years in the U.S. Navy and Navy Reserve, rising to the rank of Rear Admiral and serving as Deputy Commander. Jamie also can be found on Substack's Opinionated by Facts. Jamie, we want to thank you for your service to our country, and it's great to have you with us again.
David, thanks. Thank you, Jim, for having me back.
Also, joining us is Major General Andy Turley. Major Turley is a retired Air Force Major General and a retired senior executive with the Department of Defense. He served more than 27 years in a wide variety of active duty and reserve judge advocate positions in the wing, major command, and at the Pentagon levels. His highest military award is the Distinguished Service Medal. He is currently counsel to the law firm of Fouet in McLean, Virginia. Major, thank you so much for your service, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Dave. It's my honor to join you today.
Fantastic.
And I am going to correct you, David. That's Major General Turley.
Yes.
You can easily pick out the civilian in the group. My apologies, Major General. Jim,
no
you
worries.
Want to get us Jim, you want to get us started?
Sure, I guess I can get us started. When I was in the Air Force, and the same is true of all the military groups, there's a chain of command. And I've been wondering if I am the captain of one of the ships that fires whatever artillery they're using to destroy these ships, where does he get the command from? It has to be, he can't, I don't think he can take that on his own. And I assume that there's a chain of command where he gets the authority to do it. Because as far as I know, I don't think it's part of the United States military to blow up ships in international waters. So if I'm the ship's commander, I certainly want to be on solid footing so that I know that that command is legitimate. So for either one of you to take it on, How does he
Jim,
get
I'm
his
gonna
orders?
take the Navy answer since I think they're involved. Then I'm gonna let General Turley speak to the legalities of just how firm ground they were on. But first, I would say you're exactly right. That has to be authorized. And while this probably was approved somewhere in the Pentagon or White House and Pentagon, we do have a command structure around the world called the COCOMs, the combatant commands. And they answer really directly to the President of the United States through the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of War, which as it might be. And in this particular case, it's U.S. Southern Command, which has the area of assigned responsibility that basically covers Central America and South America. And the Southern Command is all of our forces. It's a joint and unified command. So Army, Navy, Air Force, all of the various services, although very often it is a Navy admiral that has it. And then under that is the Navy Component Command, which is 4th Fleet. And when you were mentioning, when David was mentioning the various types of ships and submarines and things like that, these would all fall under 4th Fleet. And 4th Fleet is a little bit, and the U.S. Southern Command mission is a little bit different from other places in the world. We're not really too worried about being attacked by any of those countries, but the missions we have is to actually, work with other militaries, gain influence with those communities. We also want to do humanitarian assistance and disaster relief and counter drug operations. And those drug operations are very typical. We do them all the time. As a matter of fact, as you see on the slide right there, we work with the Coast Guard, which is, while not under the Department of Defense, works very closely with it. Often you'll have Navy ships that have a Coast Guard unit on board because the Navy will provide the platform, the sensors, the intelligence, and then the Coast Guard will come in for a non-defense or war function, but rather a law enforcement function. So let me turn it over to General Turley at this point.
The situation that we're dealing with Venezuela right now, first of all, to answer your question, Jim, about how these orders flow, every COCOM has an operations center. They will develop the particular war plan from there, identify the target, and then flow it down to the operator to have that operator act on that order. So this is something that's vetted through the command. The Navy captain out there is not on his or her own by any stretch. He's really tied into a big operation, and these orders flow down from Southcom to the particular asset that they're using, be it a ship, be it a drone, be it an F-35. It would go down to Southcom, flow to each of the component commands representatives, and let's say they wanted to use a Predator, they would flow that to the Air Force, and then the Air Force would execute the order. So that's kind of how that flows. With regard to what is going on currently in the Caribbean, Jamie makes the excellent point that the Coast Guard has taken a major role around the world with regard to drug interdiction. Why? Because it's a law enforcement mission, and they're always getting thousands of tons of cocaine and other drugs and intercepting them before it gets to U.S. shores. The importance of that fact is that these particular activities that are that are taking place off of the shores of Venezuela are nowhere near the continental United States. And the issue is with regard to blowing up these boats, it is using the military for a law enforcement purpose. And that is the fundamental issue. And by conflating the two, you introduce a lot of confusion with regard to what the authorities are to use the force and what force can be applied. When you have somebody driving a drug boat, they are not a combatant. They are a civilian. whether they're armed or not. And everything is fact specific in terms of making a determination of when you can fire and who you can fire upon. The Secretary Rubio made the point that, well, in the case of blowing up, at least in response to questions about blowing up the first boat, well, we could have intercepted. We just decided to go and basically blow them out of the water. That's really problematic on a couple of levels. First of all, under U.S. law and under international law, the key to all of this is the fact that force is a last resort, not a first resort. It's if a policeman in Jackson, Mississippi, were defending herself against a threat, the threat would have to be imminent, and she would only have to use deadly force if she was in immediate danger. The same concept holds true with regard to dealing with threats against the United States. And when you talk about the international law of armed conflict, when you talk about the U.S. law of armed conflict, you're talking about the rules that exist in dealing with opposing nations and opposing armed forces. And you exercise, you take a defensive posture on that based upon the fact that whether you are fired upon or whether you're in imminent danger of being fired upon. It doesn't, the argument with regard to the drug interdiction here is the fact that, in my view, based upon my experience as a military lawyer, there was no imminent threat to the United States. The argument has been made that, well, importing drugs is an imminent threat to the United States, but when you're dealing with a small drug boat off the shore of Venezuela that wasn't even destined for the United States, as far as we can tell, to my mind, that is an improper use of military force. And as the Secretary says, what we could have done, what we usually do, is use the Coast Guard, a law enforcement agency, to go ahead and do the interdiction. There was even some discussion. I read some, is the fact that the first boat, at least, turned around when it realized it was in danger. Now, just the mere appearance or whatever the weapon system was that they were using, turn them around. That, if there's ever an argument about imminent danger, that certainly turned that around. So that's why I say that it was an improper use of military force. Even the policeman in Jackson, Mississippi, the policewoman, if a felon is fleeing, she can't shoot him in the back. Right. Which is essentially what happened in this particular circumstance. I don't consider the argument has been made that, well, drugs present a real danger to the United States and to our country. I absolutely agree with that, but it's not the same as a military threat. It's not the same as an armed force threat like Al Qaeda, like ISIS, like Iraq and Afghanistan. It is a far different threat, and it is not a threat that can be met, in my view, under both domestic and international law, by use of military force.
Let's put it in terms of land. What if there's a suspected drug lord that's driving, let's say 500 kilos of cocaine across Dallas? You can't shoot him with, a shoulder-mounted, shoulder-launched weapon and just blow up his car. We have to have some kind of evidence that can lead to probable cause. And so, so we had intelligence on this. And as Major General Turley knows, anytime an intelligence brief is being delivered, they give it with a level of confidence. And the reason that they do that is that you're putting together lots of pieces of information that may not always turn out to be the case. And so they hedge it. So, an intelligence report's a whole lot more like a weather report than it is like an indictment. It is actually based on testimony, sworn testimony. So, so they said there are drugs in that boat. They say these are drug people. They say it's headed toward the United States. Maybe it is. But, in that first boat with 11 people, that's a whole lot of people to be delivering drugs, and it's 1,000 nautical miles from the continental United States. Why do they need that many people? They could have taken some of those people out and actually had more drugs on board. So there's a real question. Well, maybe they were actually human trafficking in some ways or something like that. So you just killed a bunch of innocent people. So, the thing that concerns me, and I think the thing that General Turnley was alluding to, is somebody said, this is what we're going to do. It came down through Southern Command, and at some point there was a situation where he said, shoot that boat. And somebody had to issue an order. And the question always is that a lawful order? Because we have a duty to obey lawful orders. And we also have a duty to disobey unlawful orders. Now, I don't know that this will ever be adjudicated, because the people that would be judging this would be the people who are probably issuing the orders or issuing the operation on this. But it is a major departure from the way that the United States, and I'll have to tell you, other allies of the United States conduct business. And it's alarming to me. Nobody is for drug. Nobody is suggesting that we should allow these drugs to come out of Venezuela or to go anywhere else at all. But we have a program for that. That's what we've been doing, is interdicting these things. And it's far from going to war with Venezuela, although some of these actions may, result in some kind of reaction from Venezuela.
We know that, or let me ask you this. With Donald Trump, we don't, we don't know really what is going on in his mind or why he does certain things. But what do you think could be maybe the real reason or real reasons for the attack?
My sense is that it's intended to be a deterrent, which is fine, but that's not how we do business. The problem is you can have a deterrent, but when a deterrent becomes an illegal activity, that's a horse of a different color. And I consider this an illegal activity because of the misuse of military force in this context. So that's really kind of my sense of what's going on.
And I, the administration, Secretary Rubio, have not really come up with any legal basis for the action other than drugs are bad for America. Drugs are dangerous to America. I do think that one of the things, and I made the observation before, that the Trump administration, if you try to analyze the totality of their policy, is, well, what would a reality TV show be if you put it into the White House? And so it's always very performative. And in this particular case, who out there is for drugs and drug runners? Well, nobody is. So you can kind of say, well, this is an enemy that we can all be against together. The problem is that there are a lot of different ways to do that, and it doesn't have to involve killing people without due process. They could have stopped that boat and actually prosecuted them, and they'd still be alive. And we would have found out, were there drugs on there? Were they all drug runners? Were they actually somebody who was captured, didn't want to be on there? So the illegality of this is the thing, as General Turley says, that is most concerning about it.
And if I can add to that, the Congress authorizes the military to take actions. Under Article 1 of the Constitution, Congress has the right to declare war. Congress issued, when we went into Iraq and Afghanistan, they issued what's known as an authorization for the use of military force. And that identified use of military force against Al-Qaeda, against ISIS, and against those armed opponents that we have. There is the administration, and no military has a blank check for the use of military force. And in this case, there's no authorization for the use of military force that has come from Congress to engage in this kind of activities. I have some colleagues of mine who published an op-ed in The Hill yesterday addressing this particular issue and saying Congress should really look into this because of the misuse, in my view, of military force for a law enforcement purpose. And
by the way, I'm not sure, they haven't identified the units that were involved in this. I would think that they would have fallen under Southern Command, maybe Fourth Fleet. There may be some air forces that were viewed. You're seeing a picture of the MQ-9 Reaper, as General Turley mentioned the Predator. If it was one of these types of assets that were shooting these boats, it's probably shooting a Hellfire missile or something like that. It's a $150,000 missile to take out, a pretty decrepit looking boat, when all you really had to do was, pull in front of them and stop them. And so that's another aspect of it that makes me think it's more performative in nature. They actually want the drama of killing these people. And I'm sure it does send a message to Venezuela, but it is a medieval message in a lot of ways. It's not the way that nations in a situation where we believe in and support the international laws should behave.
Jamie, you probably know. Do you think it's cheaper to send that Hellfire missile or send a Coast Guard ship?
The Coast Guard ship's going to be out there anyway because we can't patrol it with just Hellfire missiles, right? So we have the Coast Guard cutters out there. We have the Coast Guard units that are aboard our Navy destroyers. Desron 40 is deploys ships to this area for this very purpose. We're going to have them out there anyway, and they're going to be more effective. It's like asking for the Coast Guard picking up 75,000 pounds of cocaine. That was done without a Hellfire missile, and we actually probably got the people, which means we also get to interrogate them. We get more intelligence, more information. So there are just a lot of reasons why I don't think it was good judgment and it was bad law that allowed these strikes to occur.
And if I may add, whether it is probably cheaper to go ahead and use a Hellfire missile, but it's not legal. That's my concern. And the United States should stand by the legality of its actions. And the United States has always done the right thing. And doing the right thing is conducting itself in accordance with domestic law and international law.
Well, that's why I asked the question, because one of the first things that I was introduced to when I joined the Air Force was the Uniform Military Code of Justice. And
that's right.
One of the items was that if you had to follow legal orders, but if it was an illegal order, if you wanted to take your chances and you were convinced it was an illegal order, you needed to stand up and not do it. And I couldn't find anything to justify blowing up these ships. And I want to say that somewhere there was the intelligence, and maybe it was intelligence from on the ground that the ship, this little boat, had left. I'm just a civilian, and I don't have access to all that information. I did have clearance at one time, but that was years ago. But it just really bothered me that we were killing people, and it didn't seem that there was any justification for why we were doing it.
Jim, let me throw an additional element in that the administration has used to justify this. They designated this Tren de Aragua, this gang, as they've said, well, they're a foreign terrorist organization. They've designated it, named it as a foreign terrorist organization, and that it's being controlled by Venezuela. Well, I've not seen very much evidence that convinces me of that. But the important point here is that designating somebody a foreign terrorist organization does not in and of itself justify the use of lethal force.
We're not at war with Venezuela.
That is exactly right. And we're not at war with Tren de Aragua. What we are, we want to prevent drugs from coming into this country. We have the legal means by which we do it. The means we finance through appropriations to do this kind of thing. And that does not include sending reapers and predators over the Caribbean Sea to take out stray drug boats.
Yeah, wasn't there a time, I don't know, 20 years back when we went into Colombia with some boots on the ground to help Colombia get rid of their cartel?
That's right. We had troops on the ground there in a joint task force. That was a supporting task force. We were letting the Colombians actually do the hard work. We were providing support for that, surveillance and things like that. And that was a situation, and Andy may remember, can add some color to this as well. It was pretty successful because Colombia was a hard nut to crack for a long time. And, through encouragement to the nation and to working with their forces, the good forces, they actually had some good results in stemming that flow of drugs to the United States.
Do either one of you think or feel like that maybe this is Donald Trump's attempt to force out President Maduro?
Well, if it is not working, because if anything, he is strengthening his hold on that and making Maduro look like he's under attack by this bully, United States. Probably he's helping him gain support in Venezuela as opposed to loosening or forcing him out. And I have to tell you, so Venezuela has one of the most significant oil reserves in the world. It's incredible, and yet some of the poorest people. So Maduro and his government are thieves and kleptomaniacs. They are not worthy to be in power, and they're a real problem in the Western Hemisphere, and really in some ways the world. Shooting an open boat in open water really does not do it. And even if you're claiming that it's a warning, you're warning him by killing people, and you're not really sure. There's no due process, no probable cause. If they have intelligence on it, if I were them and they'd done this, I would be bringing that intelligence out and proving to the public that these people were actually who they say they were. The problem is that all the evidence is destroyed now. So, I don't know that can ever happen.
I think picking up.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, General.
Picking up on an important theme that Jamie has hit upon, the whole purpose of international law and international law of war and law of armed conflict is to ensure that we can return to a state of peace as quickly as possible. First of all, there is no ongoing active war going on with regard to Venezuela, and I don't know that we're looking to start one or not. That's way above my pay grade. but the important thing is,
General, there's not much above your pay grade.
Well, but the important thing is the reason we follow the law, the reason we follow the laws of armed conflict and the laws of war. is because A, that's what American does, but B, when we violate it, what Admiral Barnett says is absolutely true. It hardens the resolve against the United States. When we prosecute and I know the current Secretary of Defense was involved with a couple of the special forces criminal actions in Afghanistan. And he was just outraged because people were being prosecuted for shooting civilians, for murdering civilians. Well, you know what? That is a violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And that those courts-martial went forward, not just because a court-martial convening authority said so, but because the unit itself was outraged, because that's not the way America operates. We operate within the boundaries of the law. We don't operate outside of the boundaries of the law. What my concern about the Venezuela situation is, we're operating outside the boundaries of the law.
And you think that these attacks are a violation of human rights laws, correct?
I do.
Okay.
And the key thing about human rights law is you don't kill. The military does not kill civilians, and these people are civilians. They may be bad civilians. We may not like them, but we don't kill civilians.
Kind of like free speech, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
We do know that in August, the State Justice Department increased the reward for Maduro's arrest to $50 million. So we know that he has, the Venezuelan president has a $50 million bounty on his head.
Well, I could give him some advice. Don't get in a little boat and head out.
Right. Exactly.
How far down does Southcom? Does it cover all of South America?
Yeah, it covers all of South America, and basically, Andy will have to remind me on this. I think it's everything really south of Mexico, the Caribbean, and all of Central and South America. Mexico, I think, is considered part of Northcom, Northern Command.
Where is it headquartered?
Southcom is in Mayport, Florida.
Yeah, it's in. I've been to the Southcom headquarters.
Or is it in Tampa?
CENTCOM is in Tampa.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what?
I know.
I think it's down
I know that Fourth Fleet is in Mayport or Jacksonville, Florida. I'm not sure about
this. I think Southcom is based down in the Miami area.
Miami. Yeah, that's
Yes.
right. It's Miami.
Right.
Well, I am certainly in awe of both of you and the knowledge that you've imparted on this particular subject. I'm also interested in the South China Sea and China's claim to that territory. And every once in a while, more frequently lately, they fly some of their jets pretty close to ours, or they'll have one of their ships cross diagonally in front of one of our ships and come close to a naval accident, but fortunately it's not. Are they violating international law?
Absolutely. So I've likened what the Chinese are doing in the South China Sea. We don't have a map or a chart of that, but I encourage people to look at the South China Sea. It does say China, but it borders on a lot of Southeastern Asia and the Philippines, and China has been claiming it based on an old British chart that they did a little dashed line for some reason on it, called the 9-dash line, or some people now call it the 10-dash line, and that is the sole legal basis for which they claim the entire area. and there's not as much death. I don't know if I've heard any deaths going on there, but it is a grab the same way that Putin is grabbing Ukraine. We don't get this much in the United States, but on a daily basis, there are incidents at sea between the Chinese and the Filipinos, the Vietnamese. They'll shoot water cannons, they'll collide with fishing boats, with mineral excavation boats, numerous things like that. Of course, we know that they built islands. They've improved islands out there in contravention of international law, and they've been ruled against on this. This has been brought up in international courts, and they've lost. The Chinese have lost. Andy, what would you say?
I would say that it is probably the single most important shipping lane in the world. It is key to commerce in the United States, commerce in Europe, as well as commerce in China. And the problem is that China has been just put its elbows up and said they've relied upon the 9-dash line. They've also relied upon these. They've put bases on these islands that they've constructed so that they can exert influence and control over the South China Sea. I'm surprised we haven't had more upsets than we have had. They seem to be a little quiet right now, but there is, I think, as Jamie indicated, there is probably a lot of activity going on over there that's a fairly low level. It is definitely an area that could serve as a flashpoint for armed conflict between us and China.
The World War II analysts and aficionados out there, I mean, when you look at where the Japanese went in the run-up to the American entry into World War II, that's where they headed. They went right down the South China Sea and tried to grab all of the straits all the way through to Indonesia to grab this because of the importance of those sea lines of communication.
I had a question that the Major General mentioned, and I can't think of it right now. Is it? I know what it is. Is it? What do you think the reason that they want Taiwan? Is it because of the technology, or is it just they want to take back Taiwan?
My answer is yes to both. I think there's a real historical element there, and there's also the whole technology. And Taiwan is a it's a small country, but it's a very, very productive one, and it has thrived for so many years ever since it really was established right after World War II. So I think they want both.
And I'm afraid it'll go the way, if they ever get Taiwan back, it'll go the same way as Hong Kong. Hong Kong was just a jewel of the East, and they've effectively ruined it now. It was nowhere near as productive as it was 20 years ago. And going to General Turley's point about kind of the history of it, they do see this as historically theirs. And I think that's very akin to another dictator, Putin, wanting to get Ukraine back. Really the heart of Russian culture actually started in the area around Kyiv. And so, he feels like he wants that back as part of the ancestral Russian Empire.
And this, interestingly, is why what happens in Ukraine and the United States posture with regard to Ukraine is so important and has so many ramifications for what goes on in the South China Sea with respect to Taiwan. It all ties together.
And Jamie, since you brought up President Putin. How do you think he fits into this equation with Venezuela?
Well, so there's an interesting book that has been written by one of the great authors that I think are out there, named Anne Applebaum, and it's called Autocracy, Inc.
Yes.
And, she talks in the book about how we have this kind of cartoon image in our minds about what a dictator is. He's got a uniform and he struts around like El Duce and stuff like that. I said, that's not the way it is anymore. These are corporate giants who are all working together. And we see a lot of that going on. So Putin and Xi Jinping, but also, to the degree that Narendra Modi in India is now more of it's an electoral democracy. I mean, an electoral dictatorship, but kind of acting with dictatorial policies. They're trying to kind of come together. They're all interoperating with each other. And so Venezuela is one of those that's kind of aligned that way. And we see the American rule-based order that's existed for over 80 years now starting to break apart. And I don't think that that's going to be really good for America. It's not going to be good for a lot of what we used to call the free world.
Mm-hmm.
What do you, this question for both of you, what do you think the world's opinion of America is today?
Well, Andy, you need to ask, before you answer that, ask him, is it before or after President Trump's speech to the UN this week?
Was going to ask about that, but go ahead.
I mean, I think we, far from, making friends around the world, we are alienating people with our tariffs and also our on again, off again tariffs and our denigration of other countries and various institutions, our flouting of international law. I don't think we're making friends. I think we're losing them.
Unfortunately, I think that that's true. I'll tell you, one of the biggest things that I think we're losing is the trust of our allies. After World War II, the United States worked with our allies in Europe to form NATO. And that was to be opposed to a further Russian influence, the spread of Russian influence in Europe. Since that time, we've engaged with a number of other partnerships and alliances. And again, what has been the basis of all of this is that we are the United States. We will do the right thing. We will follow the law, and you can trust us. What really concerns me now is we're losing the trust of our allies. And we're losing the trust of our allies because of tariff policy, because of support policy. How many times have we gone back and forth in terms of support for NATO, support for Ukraine? And America, I think, in the eyes of many now, cannot be trusted to be looking out for the interests of each of those nations as well as its own. Does that make sense?
Yes,
absolutely.
And I fear too that President Trump has denigrated international institutions such as NATO and UN, and I don't know, and General Charlie may know, if he can unilaterally pull the United States out of the UN. I hope that's not true. But as we've seen with his actions on various agencies in the United States government, he could effectively do it, which would nearly cause the collapse of one of the great institutions. It's not perfect. It needs reform. It's not as effective as it can be in every place, and there have been some abuses. But it is one shining area where the nations can come together and reason.
And I think that is the key to the benefit of the UN. It's not that they're going to send blue helmets in as peacekeepers or anything like that. Blue helmets, by the way, refer to UN-sponsored forces that often will go in and participate in ceasefires and those type of things. It's the fact that it's a forum where the nations of the world can come together and that they can talk. And it may not be perfect, as Admiral Barnett says, but the important thing is it's there. Where the United States is undermining it is we've withdrawn from the World Health Organization. We have withdrawn from 4 or 5 other key United Nations organizations. And that, to my mind, causes me great concern because we need to be at the table. It's important. And it's not important for us to be at the table because we're good guys. It's important for us to be at the table for the protection of United States interests here and around the world.
What is going to be the effect of maybe, I guess, the rest of the world recognizing a Palestinian state and President Trump denying that? Kind of leaves us alone, is what it seems to me.
I think we're increasingly isolated on that score. The whole Middle East issue, Gaza issue, is heartbreaking.
Yes.
I blame Hamas. They're a vicious, vile organization who don't give a damn about Palestinians. All they care about is amassing their own pardon. And they are to be blamed for all of the misery that's been invested upon Gaza. And this goes way back to 1948 when they partitioned that whole particular area. We had an opportunity to create a two-state solution at that time. Unfortunately, we couldn't, and I think we're paying the price for it in the end. The United States position, it backs Israel, which is a strong ally of ours. There's no doubt about that. But I think that it's important for us to exercise our influence over Israel to see how we can ameliorate the situation, because I think there are lots of positive things that can be done. But it's difficult, and quite honestly, I think our allies are kind of saying that they will recognize a Palestinian state, mainly to make the point that we've got to move forward. We can't sit with what we have now. Admiral Barnett, would you agree?
I would agree. And here's the difficult thing for America. America has always supported Israel. But when we equate supporting Israel with supporting Prime Minister Netanyahu, it starts to get a little more difficult because he is, waging a war in a way that is very troubling, very destructive. I mean, it's not clear what the end purpose is. At first, he said he wasn't going to occupy Gaza. Now he is going to occupy Gaza. Israel had signed on to the concept of a two-state solution. Netanyahu, over the time that he's been in office, I can't remember how long it is, but it seems like it's 2 decades now, has in essence been doing everything to keep, and make a two-state solution impossible. So the sad thing about it is I don't see a good solution on the horizon. Just like Putin doesn't want peace in Ukraine, he's just not really interested in that. I don't think Netanyahu is interested in peace right now. He's got purposes in Gaza, which include occupation, and I think that's just going to prolong the misery to Gaza. And so, as General Turley said, the actions of our allies in recognizing the Palestinian state, I think, is to goad them to say, hey, look, we need to come to we need to have some kind of recognition of the humanity of the Palestinians, even as we say the evil of Hamas.
But doesn't Netanyahu, it seems to me that Netanyahu has been continuing this more for his political gain, because he, if the war was ended today, it's my understanding that he would probably be indicted for what he did back to the justices, the justice courts or whatever, years back. and he was I think he was under indictment.
Yeah, he was under indictment. I think, I don't know about ending the war, but I think it's clear that he lost his coalition and was out of office. He could be prosecuted again, and his coalition seems to want the obliteration of the Palestinians in Gaza.
I don't want to get too far off the subjects, everything, but I'm always I try to ask this question with as many experts and leaders as I can. And the question for both of you is the United States becoming a authoritarian government?
Do you want to take that
I know
one, General? Or?
I know that's a loaded question, but
it is a loaded question. It depends on how you define authoritarian. The foundation for the United States of America is the U.S. Constitution. Embedded in that is the concept of three equal branches of government. The Congress, which is under Article 1, the President under Article 2, and the judiciary under Article 3. The founders were very specific in terms of balancing responsibilities between those three to make sure that one didn't predominate. Unfortunately, and it depends on how you define authoritarianism. If you define authoritarianism as the executive is preeminent over the other two branches, then I think I get very concerned that we're heading in that direction. And Ann Applebaum's book is very clear on how that kind of thing can happen. What worries me is that Congress has ceded its power, a lot of its power, to in many different areas, to the executive. And what worries me is that every time that there's a decision against the current administration in court, the judge involved seems to be is characterized as a wide-eyed radical, a leftist radical, when that is not the truth at all. We're a country of laws. We're not a country of men. And I think that the whole concept of a preeminent, or what they call the unitary executive theory for the presidency, that concept undermines the whole genius of the Constitution, which is balancing each one of our branches of government.
And I would agree entirely. And if you look at some of the books, like Tim Snyder's On Tyranny and Ann Applebaum's works, Twilight of Democracies and Autocracy, Inc., you can almost like have a bingo card of what's happening. So suppression of democratic institutions such as the courts, suppression of the free press, prosecution of journalists, using the courts against your enemies, disobeying various laws and mores. So the concept that, I remember, all the other previous administrations, there was this, since Nixon at least, but there was this limitation on the communications between the White House and the Attorney General, the White House and the Department of Justice. That's broken down. And as a matter of fact, he tweets, instructions to the Attorney General now on who to prosecute. As all of those start to break down, you can start looking at where else this has happened. So whether it's India, whether it's Germany and things like that, you don't go directly to dictatorship. You can go to an electoral dictatorship. That's the way it was with Hitler. Hitler was actually asked. They gained shares in the Bundesstaat. They got a certain number of people, and he was asked to form a government. And he immediately started undermining all of the democratic institutions, including the courts. And so are we autocratic? Well, we're certainly more autocratic than we were a year ago.
That kind of brought us all the way back around to why I had my question about the legality of blowing up these Venezuelan boats. It just comes back to me every time I think about it. Last week, the week before, in a press conference, the president said, "I am the president. I can do anything I want."
Fortunately, for him, that is not true. But the question is, how do you effectively counter that? And that's where the courts have had the courage to stand up and do it, despite being publicly chastised for doing it. There's another important element that's going on that I think ties in with the authoritarian theme. You know, the Department of Justice, they have rules and regulations and about how they conduct their business. You find out about a crime and then you find out about the criminal. That's being turned on its head in that you identify a quote criminal and then try to find a crime associated with that person. That's what worries me a great deal about things going on. Also, when I worked at the Department of Justice, one of the things that they always told me was the fact that you always need to be completely truthful with the court, because the courts rely upon the Department of Justice being open, honest, and above board. And unfortunately, that whole presumption of regularity, due to the conduct of the current Department of Justice, is now gone. And that breaks my heart. It really does.
It breaks the heart, I'm sure, of an awful lot of Americans. Let me ask each of you, if you were to recommend a book for everybody to read, what book would you recommend at this point?
So the two that I've mentioned, and there are a lot of great ones out there right now. But Professor Timothy Snyder wrote a book on tyranny, and the thing that I like about it is that it goes by point, you know, what the tyrant does, what the would-be autocrat would be, and then what we can do. So it kind of is an action to that. Ann Applebaum's Autocracy, Inc., it gives us a much clearer view, kind of updates our view on that. You know, we're not just dealing with one autocrat, we're dealing with a worldwide network of autocrats. I don't want to sound like the old James Bond chaos or any of the other type of criminal organizations, but there's a parallel to it, you know, that's very concerning, because it means they're more organized and they're more interdependent and self-supported. So those would be the two books that I would recommend to you.
And I have a third one. Ruth Ben-Ghiat is a history professor at New York University. She is the author of a book that I think came out within the past year called Strongmen. It's from Mussolini to the present, and she does an excellent job with highlighting how this has developed over the years.
And that was the name of it, just to reemphasize, was Strongmen, right?
Yes, Strongmen, from Mussolini to the present.
General, I've got one last question, and it's yours. Listening to you and Jamie, the blowing up of these boats in the Caribbean appears, or at least sounds to me, like it's not a legal action. Who can file a lawsuit, or who would have standing to challenge that in a lawsuit? Because somebody had to approve this, and I just can't imagine that it did not get run by some JAG officer somewhere that either ignored it or signed off on it or something. So who would have standing to challenge this?
That's a very good question. I think the first people who would have standing would be the families of the people killed in the boats. But that's filing an action against the United States is a long, costly process, and it's not very practical. In terms of other people, see, the thing is, you have to have standing. You really have to show a harm, and it's going to be difficult. This is why I think Congress really needs to look at it, and this is why my colleagues in their op-ed that they filed yesterday on the Hill have said, Congress, please take a look at this, because it's really an issue of authorities between Congress and the executive. So unfortunately, I'm not sure there's a judicial remedy involved here.
It certainly wouldn't be a good one. I mean, like I said, it's just the burden on some poor family in Venezuela, and then the fact that they would, might run into the thing. Well, was your family member actually running drugs? But I suppose that you could file a wrongful death action in Venezuela, get a judgment, but then I don't know how you'd be able to enforce that judgment in Venezuela.
Or whether you'd want to even try, because you might not come back.
And Jim, you've hit on one of the things that concerns me is, what is the accountability for this? This seems unlawful. The administration is not coming forth with evidence or a legal basis for the action, and there doesn't, unless the Congress investigates it and has some kind of oversight to bring out accountability. I think it not only remains unaccounted for, but it also can be repeated.
I'm sure it'll be repeated. I don't trust what's going on.
This is why it's important for Congress to step in and examine this, because that's the counterbalance.
That may be a good place for us to end on that too. That's what really needs to happen next.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you, Major General Turley. Thank you so much, Jamie Barnett. Thank you so much again. It's good to see you. But this has been great, and we do want to maybe in a few months maybe follow up again with you guys. Jim, what do you got to close us out with?
The only thing I've got to close us out with is to those who are viewing this and have enjoyed it, I hope that you've learned something. That's the purpose of what we're doing, is to try to educate people. And when we're doing this, it costs money. So if you've got a few extra bucks in your pocket, David can tell you where you can send them. And David and I would be very appreciative, because at this point, it's kind of David and I and a couple of other people that are sponsoring this. So, David, do your shtick and tell them where to send the money.
Absolutely. We do appreciate you listening. We appreciate you watching. We do ask that you subscribe, and yes, to subscribe, it is free. Now, you can donate to the podcast at our website, which is mshappenings.org. Now, you can also donate at our Cash App, which is the Cash App is $, MS Happenings, and also on PayPal, which is the @ MS Happenings. And also you can send us an email at mshappenings1@gmail.com. That's mshappenings and the number 1 @gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. We would love to hear what you think about this. We want your thoughts, your criticisms, your comments, whatever. We do enjoy this. Jim and I enjoy this, and we get an opportunity to meet so many interesting and knowledgeable people like Major General Turley and Admiral Jamie Barnett. So this has been a lot of fun. And I also want to invite you to check out Jamie Barnett's Substack, which is Jamie's Opinionated. Well, that's all one word, which is Opinion Aided by Facts. So it's good to see everybody. And guys, thank you so much. And
David,
as always,
David,
yes, sir. Yes.
I forgot to mention, we are a 501c3, so any donations are tax exempt. So we're
Absolutely
legit. The IRS will be looking for us next year. So
absolutely. So please subscribe and please donate if you can. And as always, may we never be indifferent to the suffering of others. Thanks so much.